Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Theology Central Podcast headquarters, the Theology Central Podcast. And if you do not know, the Theology Central headquarters is located right here in Ovalo, Texas. And it really, when I say the Theology Central Podcast headquarters, it's really just the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church. But if I call it the Theology Central headquarters, it sounds more important, doesn't it? Does it give some sense of authority coming to you live from the Theology Central Podcast headquarters right here in the middle of Texas? Does that work? Okay. It probably doesn't add anything to it. So let's just do this the normal way. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It is Wednesday, August the 25th, 2021. It is currently 4:08 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in the middle of nowhere, Texas, also known as Ovalo, Texas. Also known as the home of the Theology Central Podcast. Yes, there's a great big sign right when you get ready to pull into Ovalo. There's this big sign that says the home of the Theology Central Podcast. And if you believe that, well, then you will believe absolutely anything. Okay, so yes, I'm having a little fun this afternoon. It has been an absolutely crazy 12, 13 hours. It's been crazy since our last broadcast that it went off the air yesterday evening. When it went off the air, 30 minutes after that last live broadcast that aired yesterday, it has been just absolutely crazy. We have received more email, more response from the episodes that we did yesterday than from anything I have ever done with the Theology Central Podcast. More emails, more contacts, more just people having their own thoughts and opinions, people doing extensive research. It has been absolutely crazy and overwhelming. Now, I've had podcasts that I did in the past when I did a different podcast where I received more emails and more contacts and say a 24-hour period. But to be fair, it hasn't even been a true 24 hours. So this may break the record as the most contacts I've ever had. It has really been crazy. And it's one of those things that when I did the two broadcasts yesterday, I just thought that we had stumbled upon something very interesting. We were going to pursue truth and not just listen to accusations. And then we kind of, we kind of opened the door to all kinds of issues surrounding theology and doctrine and the charismatic world. And so I thought it was an interesting, fun 2 hours plus of broadcasting, but I had no idea of everything that was going to occur. Literally, I don't even know where to begin. I have so many emails and so much information that's been sent to me. So what we may do is I may be using these emails over the next few weeks or months, just taking certain things from each email and just creating an entire episode around that one particular point made in the emails. That's how much information I have. In fact, with all of the information I have, they've almost basically given me 6 months of broadcasting content. I mean, I couldn't even cover it all. So I'm very grateful for every single person who took time to email, who, gave me your thoughts and opinions, even those who were very upset with me. Okay. Everyone, I greatly appreciate it. It's so weird. Like sometimes I'm thinking, okay, this is going to generate the response and I get silence. Sometimes I'm almost begging, pleading for a response and I get nothing. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, well, that was interesting. Let's go home and have supper. And then I check my email. And I'm like, well, what just happened? And that was the case yesterday. So this is part 3. So let me try to get you caught up. All right. Let me tell you everything that has occurred. Yesterday, I don't know what time yesterday. I don't remember exactly. I came across a video from a YouTube channel called Reformation Charlotte. Some of you may be familiar with their work, some of you may not. They had posted a video the day before. I think they posted the video on August the 23rd. I discovered the video on August the 24th. The video claimed, let me state this. In the video, they showed a video clip of a broadcast between two individuals. One of the individuals in this video that they showed, her name was Jenna Winston, which they claim, Reformation Charlotte claimed in the title for their video that she was an ordained Bethel pastor, obviously implying that she was an ordained pastor of Bethel-church in Redding, California. That clearly what seemed to be the implication. And the comments under it everyone seemed to understand that that's what was being implied. So they were claiming that the video that they showed on there. So they made a video which contained the video from a different broadcast. And in the video clip that they used, there were two people speaking, and the main person that was speaking was a person, again, by the name of Jenna Winston, who they claim was an ordained Bethel pastor. And they had a video clip which seemed to give, or at least, they just came out, Reformation Charlotte just came out and said in their title that this ordained Bethel pastor states that God does not know our exact future. Therefore, she has subscribed to open theism. Now, I'm paraphrasing a little bit and you'll understand the reason why in just a second. Okay, so basically, they post this video, which contains a video clip of a different broadcast. In that broadcast, there's a female by the name of Jenna Winston, which Reformation Charlotte identified as being an ordained Bethel pastor. And they stated that in the video clip that they were going to show you, that she states that God does not know our exact future. Therefore, they claim in the video, they place, words on the video saying that this is open theism. Therefore, they accuse her of subscribing to open theism, the heresy of open theism. And we took, and broadcast number one, we played the audio that Reformation Charlotte provided. They provided the video. We turned it into an MP3 file, and we played that. Now, there was a couple of problems. Problem number one, Reformation Charlotte did not provide where the original source for the video that they were showing, where it came from. They didn't give you here's the source. Even in the description, they didn't provide a link saying here, go watch the entire thing for yourself. So there was problem number one. Problem number two, they took a very, 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 very short section from obviously the larger broadcast. I think they played maybe 15 seconds, maybe 10 to 15 seconds of the video that they were claiming proves all of this. Okay. Not only did they play only a 10 or 15 second section, they would stop it. They stopped it. Then they would move forward. Then they would stop it. And then they would reverse it and make it go back and repeat a phrase. And then they slowed the audio way down. And they were doing all of this to emphasize, listen to what she's saying. If you missed that, here it is again. If you missed it, here it is again. And so not only did they took a very small section, they didn't even let it play all the way through without chopping it up and editing it. All right. So when it was all said and done, it appeared that Jenna Winston was saying, God does not know your exact future. That's what it appeared to be saying. And that's what Reformation Charlotte accused the woman of preaching and teaching, and that she subscribed to open theism. Well, what we did is I came on the air. We reviewed that. We listened to it. I told everyone about open theism, that it's a heresy. And that I obviously 100% reject open theism, and that it looked bad, but there was a lot of things we needed to find out. Where was the original video? What was said? What was the context? Is she actually associated with Bethel-church? There were lots of things we had to find out. And all of the listeners immediately jumped in and started researching and sending me information, even before I got to the second broadcast. By the time I got to the second broadcast, here's what we had. We had the full we had the original video. We had the whole thing. So I took it and converted it into an MP3 file, uploaded it to our software. I think it was almost 30 minutes long. And in the second broadcast, we reviewed the entire thing. Now, did we discover a number of theological issues? Oh, yes, we did. There was so many theological issues, so many theological problems as Jenna Winston was talking. However, when we got to the actual section where the claim was that she was basically teaching and embracing open theism, we found out that when she said someone doesn't know our exact future, it seems clear when you listen to it in context, she was not referring to God not knowing our exact future, but Satan not knowing our exact future. Satan knows our calling and our gifting, and then Satan then hits us with the opposite of our calling and our gifting. That seemed to be clear in what she said. So clearly, Reformation Charlotte had misrepresented what was said. They clearly did not even provide context or anything. I mean, there was a major problems with everything Reformation Charlotte did. So we corrected it. We tried our best to be fair. Now, I still offered a lot of criticism of what Jenna Winston was teaching because I 100% reject her teachings. And I mean, I could go all day and everything associated with what's going on. We were able to find out that it appears she was ordained by Bethel-church. However, she's not, we don't think she's associated with Bethel anymore. She moved to Los Angeles, where she kind of has her own ministry now, where you can pay her money. And then you have these like Zoom sessions where you tell her about whatever behavioral issue, problem, struggle, and then she taps basically into the Holy Spirit and then can tell you what the real problem is. And however, for this to occur, for you to experience this ministry, you've got to pay her, well, a whole lot of money. And then she has these courses she teaches. And if you want to get the teaching, you got to pay her money to get the teaching. So there's so many problems with everything in regards to her ministry. But it appears, at least that section of video where they claim that teaches open theism, that specific section, she wasn't saying what they claim she was saying. Now, earlier on, she did state that things happen in our lives that may not be God's will. So things can happen in your life that isn't God's will. Now, this leads to all kinds of questions, all kinds of problems, and it ultimately that statement would be somewhat connected to open theism. However, the second statement that Reformation Charlotte was trying to say, she said that they completely misrepresented it. So we did 2 hours plus breaking this all down, trying to get everyone the truth and the facts. And the practical lesson that we came from this is so very important. I don't care what you're talking about as a Christian. I don't care if you're talking politics. I don't care if you're talking medicine. I don't care if you're talking science. I don't care if you're talking evolution. I don't care what you're talking about. We have a responsibility to speak truth, not misinformation, not misrepresentation, not false claims. We are to speak truth. Now, are we always going to be accurate? No. When we're not accurate, we need to come out and acknowledge our mistake, say we messed up, offer a retraction, offer a correction, and maybe even an explanation of how we messed up. It's very easy to do that. Now, it's not always fun. It can be humiliating, but that's what we have to do sometimes. We have to sometimes be willing to say, look, here I am, you can contact me and I can tell you, hey, this is what happened and this is what occurred. So I think we did a very good job in trying to teach that practical lesson and demonstrating the power of just people pursuing truth and investigating and trying to find out what the truth is. And the listeners, they kept researching well into the evening, early morning hours. I kept receiving emails. You should see the amount of content and information that's been sent to me, not only about Jenna Winston and her ministry, about Bethel, so many, the whole issue of deliverance ministries. It is like, it's like a treasure chest of show prep. All right. Literally. So what we're going to do is one individual sent me a video of Bill Johnson from Bethel-church. Now, this one, there's no question that he's associated with Bethel. No question at all. So we have a video of Bill Johnson from Bethel-church, basically teaching about what is God actually in control? Is God in control or just in charge? And the question that the person, I don't know if they asked it as a question. I think they said it more as a statement. I don't know if this is open theism or is it open theism. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to it because it sounds a little bit like what Jenna Winston said earlier on in the video presentation that we took apart, where she made a statement that things can happen in your life, that many times things happen in your life or many things happen to you in your life that isn't God's plan. So that would seem to imply that he's not in control. But if he's not in control, can he still be in charge? So we're going to take this apart and listen to this in just a minute. But I have to give you a big update of what occurred. After my second broadcast, I'd already posted one message on Reformation Charlotte's YouTube page saying, hey guys, do you have the original video? Can you give me the link to the original video? Because I would like to review the original and its full context for our podcast. And I never got a response. So after our second broadcast, I posted another comment saying, hey guys, we just spent 2+ hours doing live broadcast about this situation, and I don't think that your accusations fairly represent what occurred. I don't think Jenna Winston said what you said. I think what she was saying is that Satan does not know our exact future, but he does know our calling and giftings, and he hits us with the opposite. And I said, so I don't know if this was completely accurate. Well, I never got a response. No one ever came over to our YouTube page. Nothing. No emails, no contact, nothing. They never responded to me in any direct way. But guess what magically happened? Their original video about an ordained Bethel pastor saying that God doesn't know our exact future magically disappeared. Gone. They just deleted the video. No explanation, no retraction, no correction, no apology, just gone. No response to me, just gone. Now look, I can understand making mistakes. I can. I make lots of mistakes. I can understand that you hear something and you think, oh my goodness, what did they just say? And then you're like, man, turn on the microphone, make that YouTube video, let's correct this. And then somewhere you're like, oh, wait a minute, I messed up here. That's not what they've said. I know I have found myself guilty of that. We've all done it. It's one thing to make a mistake, but why would you just delete it? Right? Why wouldn't you just make a correction video and talk about the process that was used to create the video, why you missed it, why you edited it the way you edited the clip? What was your, because that's a lesson for all that. That's an opportunity to teach everyone that when we're out there trying to quote unquote do discernment, be discerning, that there is a correct way and an incorrect way. And here is how we made our mistake. So we want to teach you so that you don't make the same mistake. That's humble. That's humility. And that would be a great video and it would be a great lesson, but maybe they will make that later. Maybe. But as of right now, you'll never know the video existed. So they just deleted it. Now, I cannot say they deleted it because of my broadcast. I cannot say they deleted it because of my comment. I cannot say that. It's just very interesting. After our broadcast and after my comment, the video disappeared very soon after. So maybe it's just a coincidence or, well, as I would believe, God's providence, okay, because I believe God works all things according to his counsel. Okay, we could get a whole discussion about that, but it's gone. So that was a very interesting development in the entire situation. I think that what we demonstrated in 2+ hours is the need for not only discernment, but for good research, thinking things through, checking facts, looking for context, And I'm just glad that the way we did it is we basically did it all live on the air, and the listeners participated. The listeners dug in. The listeners did the research. I've said it before. My listeners are the best research team that any broadcaster could have. I wish I had the money to pay all of my listeners for their research efforts because they dig in. And we have it's just interesting. I don't know why this has occurred, but we have a lot of listeners to this podcast that have either been associated with Bethel, they've known people who've attended Bethel, or they've themselves have spent years researching Bethel. I don't know why we've kind of drawn in that crowd, has found us. It's kind of interesting. It's a big responsibility to try to ensure that, again, we try to be factual. I mean, it's very important. So that's kind of where we are. It's gone. And now the problem is, well, actually, I think Reformation Charlotte has another video about Jenna Winston earlier on about Jesus supposedly getting in bed with her and playing with her hair. Now, I haven't looked at that video to try to find out the original so that we could either verify if that is true or false. Maybe we need to do that as well. That may be a different broadcast. Okay, so someone said maybe the reason we have so many Bethel people is because I'm willing to talk about it, and it's a huge problem. It's kind of interesting, and to the person who just responded, they may know this or may not know this. It's kind of interesting, and I'm beginning. Well, I've always known this, and this is one of the things I'm just really bad at. If you're smart, when you do a podcast episode, the title is everything. And the reason the title is everything is you've got to make sure your title that people searching for information about a particular subject can find you. All right. And when we did an entire series where we were basically taking virtual road trips to the most influential churches in America. I created a list of the 50 of the most influential churches in America. And then each broadcast, I basically gave you, okay, here's the church, here's a little bit of history, here's what we know about the church, here's what's going on their website. I mean, give you some information. And then we would go and I would just pick the very first sermon on one of these churches' website and we would review it. So we went to churches I didn't even know anything about. So it was a fun series. Now, it never really gained much popularity or much traction. And what's interesting is one of the churches we reviewed in that series on the most influential churches in America was Bethel-church. Bethel-church. But see, the thing is it didn't gain any traction because I think the title was, most influential churches, part number 4. Most influential churches, part number 6. Most influential churches, part 7, part 8, part 10, part 11. And so people looking for maybe something specific about one of those most influential churches, if they were searching for it, they were not going to come across our episodes that were labeled or titled most influential churches. I probably could have found people looking for Bethel information if I would have changed the titles of all of those and given the title of each church as the title of the podcast episode. So maybe we need to go back and revisit that series and do that again, because when you're looking at the most influential churches in America, there's people out there looking for their content. So if each one of my titles would be like, Evolution, is it Evolution Church? Elevation Church? Yeah, I think it's Elevation Church. Stephen Furtick, I believe. If it has that title, then like part 1, part 2, whatever, then I think people will find it. So we sometimes you learn these things when later than you should have. I know this, but a lot of times when I don't give a lot of thought to the title, I'm more interested in getting here, hooking everything up and turning on the microphone. And I just throw in the first title that comes to mind and just go. And I've got to do a better job at going, slow down. Let's come up with a title that people will, if they're searching, they can find the content. I need to get better at that. So all of that said, already we spent a lot of time just kind of reviewing, I know, but we're going to jump into this. So here's what happened. One individual sent me he sent me a clip of Bill Johnson talking about, is God in control? And I said, well, do you have the full thing? Do you have the full thing? And this is what the individual told me in the email that he sent. Let me find it here because I have so many. Okay, this is what he said. Here's a longer clip of his in charge but not in control teaching. Since this was part of a classroom setting rather than a Sunday sermon, I don't think I can find the whole thing, but it might be archived somewhere on Bethel TV. Now, it may be bethel-tv.com. This clip does a good job of demonstrating how he bounces around and connects seemingly unrelated things. He uses a lot of orthodox language, but when you toss the word salad together, it makes it very confusing about what he's trying to say. I still can't answer the question, is this open theism? So we're going to listen to this. Again, this was a classroom setting. Bill Johnson is teaching, and it's basically God is in charge, but he's not in control. Is this open theism? Now, this sounds to me, at least the title and the setup here, very similar to what Jenna Winston said in the clip we reviewed yesterday, where she made the statement that things happen in our life that's not part of God's plan. So maybe we're going to find a common thread here where maybe they're not full-blown open theism, but they're very close. Maybe it could just be theological ignorance. And because look, I've heard pastors say things about the doctrine of the Trinity that literally puts them in the camp of modalism, Sabellianism, and all kinds of other heresies. And and the few times when they will email me back, they will be like, "Oh, wow, I didn't even realize that. I didn't even know what modalism was." Now, it's shocking that a pastor would not know, but it's just ignorance. So then sometimes you can just instruct them, go, no, the doctrine of the Trinity, this is the orthodox teaching of the Trinity. What you're teaching is not. And just a little clarification and sometimes goes a long way. So I always I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? Can Bethel-church be saying things that just because they don't have the theological understanding, or is it on purpose? I put it this way, they're responsible either way. Right? They're responsible. Okay. Any pastor standing behind the pulpit, we're responsible to make sure our theology is correct. Now, we may be ignorant, and if we make the mistake, we have to acknowledge it, but we should always be learning and trying to fix it. So whether they're doing this on purpose or not doing it on purpose, they are responsible. And that's the one thing we can all agree on. All right. So here we go. Bill Johnson. Wow. What a crazy couple of hours. Again, I'm still looking at my email. I can't even tell you right now in my email inbox, just to give you an idea, this is how many emails I have in my inbox as of right now, Wednesday, August the 25th at 4:35 p.m. 63,333. Now, a lot of those are older, but I'm just saying that's a lot of emails, okay? And it's crazy how many emails have come in the last 12, 13, 14 hours. So, we're going to be visiting a lot of the content and doing different things. But let's see if we can do this, since this is very much directly related to the subject yesterday. Bethel Church, open theism. Here's Bill Johnson. No question of his connection with the church. So therefore, this would definitely add to, well, maybe they are over here in the open theism camp. Here we go.
A lot of people have ignored the command to heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils, cleanse lepers, until there's a family crisis, and then they try to learn how to get a healing anointing.
Okay, we didn't make it very far. All right, just so that everyone knows. Okay, again, I always have to be very fair and transparent. This is the kind of stuff, when I just hear these words, there is an anger that builds in me. When I hear that people have ignored the command to heal the sick and to raise the dead and do all of these things, again, because they believe that every Christian can and should do these things because it is God's will right now. Now, I am so tired and sick and tired and frustrated and angry about that. That's the one thing about the charismatic theology that I just can't tolerate, is this belief that healing and raising the dead is guaranteed right now while we're here on earth. When, again, I drive by a cemetery every time I drive to the church, every single time, every day, every night when I drive to the church or away from the church, I drive right past a cemetery. Now, there's charismatic churches all over this place. Go raise them from the dead. In fact, if you're not too busy this Wednesday evening, you can. I'm here in Ovalo, Texas. You can go from Ovalo, Texas to Buffalo Gap, Texas, which is about 6 miles. Buffalo Gap, Texas is where I grew up. And then outside of Buffalo Gap, Texas, about 2.5 miles out in the middle of nowhere on the right side of the road, you'll come across Buffalo Gap Cemetery. If you pull through the gate, stay to the road that goes to the left, drive all the way up to the top of the hill and stop, there's a little chapel there. And right across from the chapel is my mother's grave. Phil, please go raise her from the dead. Please do so. All right. No, it's not going to happen. And Bethel-church, people ignore the command to raise the dead. Well, why weren't you able to raise the little girl who died that your church claimed? You weren't able to do that. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I'm so tired of hearing it. They no matter how many times they fell, how many times it doesn't happen. In fact, I think Bill Johnson, even in the video, he's wearing a pair of glasses. Just heal your eyesight, for crying out loud. Why are you wearing glasses? I mean, come on. I just, maybe because I was never in the charismatic world, I just don't understand how you can believe something that is so easy to show you it's not happening the way you claim it happens. You claim healing is guaranteed, and I will show you death after death after death after death. I will show you charismatic Look, I worked again, I've told you before, when I would drive to the hospital where I worked, and at one point I was in charge of the appointment line, all right? So I would drive past a church right there on the left-hand side of the freeway. Right, New Hope Church in Abilene, Texas. You can look it up. And I would listen to their sermons week after week after week, and they would claim, Sunday night we're having a healing service. Sunday, and all of these people were healed, and they were always talking about healing, miracles, and that tongues of fire was going to appear on the top of their building, and just all the typical charismatic stuff. And then I would get to work, and in many cases I'd be working the appointment line with all the people who worked for me, and someone would call in, and I would know, this person goes to New Hope Church and they're calling for an appointment. And you know how hard it was for me to say, don't call me, go to your church and get healed. Why do you need an appointment? In fact, one of the people who worked the appointment line with me, who worked for me, was a part of the praise and worship team for that church. And we got into lots of heated discussions, but there were multiple times I'd be like, hey, we're running out of appointments. Could you just start healing people over the phone? Now, I know I probably shouldn't say something like that. I know it was very sarcastic, but it would just drive me crazy. Like, how? And then when she got sick, she was going to the doctor. I'm like, why are you taking up an appointment? No, you can't go see the doctor. No, you can't have the day off. No, you cannot go home sick. Heal yourself. Do it. And they never did it. She never healed one person in the building. She never stopped anyone dying from cancer. She never healed anybody. She never healed herself. She was out for multiple weeks for a medical issue. Never healed herself. She worked with me, who has a neurological and a seizure disorder because of what happened to me with anthrax when I was in the military. She never healed me. Just an absolute, how can you believe this stuff? I just don't understand. It just drives me crazy. So some people have ignored the command to do these things, all right? So we'll back that up. I know we didn't get very far. We want to get to the open-theism stuff, but it just, every time you listen to charismatics teach, it's the same thing over and over and over. It's like they just keep saying it no matter how much evidence is contrary to their doctrine. By his stripes we're healed, and that means physical healing right here, right now. That's not talking about eternity. That's not talking about our sin. That's here and now. And then you're like, People in your church are dying. People in your church are getting old. People in your church have high blood pressure. People in your church have cholesterol. People in your church are having heart attacks. People in your church are having strokes. People in your church have aneurysms. People in your church have cancer. Well, it doesn't matter, 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 doesn't matter. How many people, I was in the military, how many people came back from Iraq and Afghanistan with no arms and no legs? Didn't see the charismatics waiting at the airport to fix it. Of course not.
A lot of people have ignored the command to heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils, cleanse lepers, until there's a family crisis, and then they try to learn how to get a healing anointing. Yeah. Things are difficult to learn in crisis.
Why do you have to learn how to do it? Why do you have to learn how to do it? Lord, my mother is in the hospital. She's going to die. Lord, please heal her. I trust in your power and your ability. You are sovereign. You are God. You are omnipotent. Heal her. Do I need to take a course on how to do that? Do I need to get a diploma or a certificate from Bethel's School of Ministry? Do I need to go to Bethel to learn how to do this? Is there a trick to it? Do I have to pay you $100 to how to do it? $300 on how to do it? Do I have to get your DVD series? Do I have to get your study series? Can I just call upon the sovereign God of the universe to heal whomever? Do I really need to learn some secret trick? Is that the problem? Is I didn't learn the secret trick and that's why my mother died? Is that the problem? Yeah, you got to learn how to do it. I didn't realize that. Maybe that's my problem. If I could just learn how to do this. Obviously, all the people at Bethel who learned how to do it couldn't raise a little girl who died. Someone explain that to me?
It's difficult to learn how to minister healing to the sick when it's your loved one. There's many strikes against you. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it's the most difficult context in which to learn what Jesus commanded us to do before we ever had a crisis. The best way to prepare yourself to operate in a gift of faith is to already operate in the abiding faith. The abiding faith has an overall approach to life that draws from the goodness of God and knows everything works for His good. Carrying that attitude, it's not just a psychological attitude, it's not just being...
Now, I have to just remind us, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. There's some very specific things, and all things work together for good. You may want to read the verses preceding it. We've been in Romans 8 now for I don't even know how long here at this church. We spent a lot of time looking at that context. So just, when you're going to quote the verse, you may want to quote all of it because there's some very specific things going on there. So I know I'm very aware that he knows the verse, probably knows it even better than I do. But if you're going to deal with it, you got to deal with it in a fuller context because that verse is so just thrown out there and sometimes never really taken apart.
Positive. It certainly includes that. But it's carrying that overall approach to life that everything works for good. Even the worst thing, God is prepared to reverse its effect so that tragedy becomes triumph. That abiding faith is what positions us for what we need in crisis, the gift of faith. It's difficult to move from ground zero to extraordinary faith. What I'm trying to say is that we get real serious about breakthrough and the anointing for breakthrough and the extraordinary miracle when we face family crisis or perhaps a loved one or a very close friend is in crisis. And it's okay to learn to do that, but Jesus didn't fast for a miracle. He fasted into a lifestyle. He told the disciples when they struck out and couldn't help the kid that was tormented, they came to him and says, how come, everything we've tried in the past has worked, it didn't work this time, how come? Jesus said this kind only comes out with prayer and fasting, and yet he neither prayed nor fasted because he had already prayed into a sustainable lifestyle. He already fasted, prayed his way into a sustainable lifestyle. So fasting wasn't necessary for him in the moment because he had come into an awareness of divine purpose, the will of God. Most of us know the will of God on an intellectual level. We know that he wants everybody healed, but not from an abiding level, not from a place of conviction. Faith is the...
Or Jesus is the eternal Son of God, God incarnate, God in the flesh, true God and true man. Maybe, possibly, but this goes along with some of their other teachings, which we've already dealt with, which, we could go, I don't want to start chasing, I don't want to go there because we could open up that old door, but yeah, their whole issue with how to understand Jesus in the incarnation, and yeah, there's a whole host of issue. Okay, yes, why, well, yeah. There's a comment here. We may get into that as well. I'm trying to be very careful because there's this clip is not super long, so I want to try to get to this. But I may have to circle back around to some of this. But we're already at 41 minutes. Man, it's amazing how quick an hour can go in a live broadcast. All right, here we go.
Conviction of things hoped for. Abiding faith is to be that which burns in us. It's that overall awareness that nothing can come at me that God doesn't have a present-day solution for. Carrying that kind of abiding faith is what prepares me, or positions me, I should say, for that faith that I need for something that is beyond what I have experienced so far. Does this make sense? Yes. Let's just put it in numbers for money, just because it's so easy to measure. You start off, with $10 faith, and through the years you build. And let's say that it's no problem at all for you to believe God for $1,000. Provision, a miracle of provision for $1,000, because you've worked into that level. You have no problem at all. Just something comes up.
Okay, I got to stop right here, and I have to laugh because someone was saying, I know we know why, just venting. No, I look, I understand it. If you were to ever, the person listening, if you were ever to watch, or if you were ever to be in the same room with me when I'm listening, well, when I do anything, when I read a book, watch a movie, that I am so animated. Like when I'm listening to a sermon, I usually pace and I'm talking back to the sermon. When I'm watching a movie, I'm standing up, I'm yelling at the screen. It doesn't matter what. When I'm reading a book, I don't sit when I read. I pace back and forth, and I'm talking to the characters in the book. I'm like, what are you doing? And when I listen to a sermon, I'm like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Wait, no. And yeah, so I'm way too animated in some cases. So I can definitely understand the venting, but I just have to, this is not a plug, but it is very interesting. He's talking about provision and, that God provides. This week, all week, we've been, for our Bible study exercise, we're in 1 Kings chapter 17, which the famous story of Elijah being sent to the widow, and that's where his provision was going to come from. And we've been looking at that section, and I started the Bible study exercise with really challenging people to struggle with this concept of provision, because I struggle with this all day, because there are some scriptures that people interpret to mean that God will always provide. He's always going to provide food. He's not going to always provide our wants. He will always provide our needs. I've heard that preached a million times. And I struggle with this concept, and here's the reason I struggle with it. Every single day in the world in which you currently live, around 24,000 people starve to death. I think 4 people every 11 seconds starve to death. Out of that 24,000 people that starve to death every day, around 10,000 are children. So I think sometimes when we start talking about provision, and that God's going to provide, we can't ignore the reality of how many people starve to death every single day in our world. It's literally frightening and horrific. And so I did a little bit of, I offered kind of a different interpretation to some of this, and I really challenged this. And it's a hermeneutical challenge, because a lot of people take that story in 1 Kings, and instead of just understanding it as a historical narrative that describes what occurred, maybe there's some principles that we can draw from it they turn it into almost a prescription and how God provides for us. And so it's just interesting he's mentioning provision, and we've been talking about that all week in our Bible study exercise on 1 Kings. And I really, really challenged people about that. I was really hoping that was going to spark a larger discussion. It really hasn't, but I'm hoping people are at least this week struggling with that concept, because you can't just say, hey, God will always provide for your needs. Yeah, it's easy to say when you're sitting in a church in America. How about if you're sitting in a church in, basically you're sitting outside under a tree in some other country and you're starving to death? It may be different. So I just think that's an important concept to think about. Right? I won't go all the way into that, but it's just interesting. He's talking about provision here.
I know God's going to provide. But when you have a $20,000 bill that comes in unexpectedly, a crisis, something happened to the house, and you all of a sudden have a crisis, then you can't operate out of that abiding faith that has worked itself like a muscle up to a level of strength. You now need something supernatural to invade where you are, and where you are is that place of abiding faith.
Now, this seems to me, now the person listening is, sometimes I feel inadequate that I'm the one behind the microphone, because most of our listeners are far more knowledgeable about things related to charismatic doctrine, theology, and practice. So I may need to be corrected here. When I hear what he's saying, this is what I hear, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you can have that the level of provision one receives is dependent on their level of faith. So if you have a level of faith that will only get you the provision of, say, $500, well, when that $20,000 bill comes in, you need a greater level of faith. Something has to activate a greater level of faith that where you can get the provision of the $20,000. If not, you're going to be stuck with only God's going to give you $500 when you have a bill of $20,000, because you don't have the level of faith. So your lack of provision is due to your lack of faith. If you could grow in your faith, then you could get greater provision. So, because I'm sitting here in a little church in the middle of nowhere, Texas, where we don't have a lot of money, we could probably have more money and a bigger church, nicer building. I could have a nicer computer. I could have a nicer microphone. I could have a nicer podcast setup. If my level of faith would just increase, then God would provide nicer things. But I'm stuck here at this level because it's basically becoming muscle memory, and my level of faith is not increased. I think that's what I'm hearing. And I'm going to look here just to see if I'm incorrect. Okay. All right. So the person listening says, I do think that is what he is saying. This is part of the word of faith theology that they seem to ascribe to. And I think it's just an interesting concept, because how do you go, like, it's like, it's very theoretical. It's not very practical, because I'm like, okay, look, guys, like, let's say I've got a family in my church and they're having all kinds of financial issues and health issues and they're struggling. And I just want, in my looking to them, I would say, hey guys, if you want a greater level of provision to cover all of the issues that you're struggling with, you just need a greater level of faith. And so something has to activate that greater level of faith. But exactly how do you develop that greater level of faith? Now, I've seen this. This is scary, but I've seen this not even in a charismatic church. I've seen this in an independent fundamental Baptist church. In the independent fundamental Baptist world, there's something called faith. I think it's called Faith Promise Missions, right? And every year, some missionary would show up at your church, and it was called Faith Promise Missions. And that's where you, by faith, promise to give a certain amount of money above your tithing to missions. And what it was do is this was supposed to grow your faith. So in other words, okay, hey, it's Faith Promise Missions time. And then you would have to literally write down and put in the thing of how much you're promising, and you're promising it by faith, and it's above your tithe. It means even if you don't have the money, like you were to go beyond what you know you can afford. Like if you think you can only afford $50 a month, you were to promise $100 a month. And then what would happen is that God would then by faith, in a miraculous way, provide you the money you need to pay off off your faith promise missions. And I even heard at one time, hey, if you have to, you pay and you meet that faith promise missions obligation. If you have to, you pay your bills on a credit card and you go in debt. And I'm like, because you're demonstrate faith. And ultimately at some point, God will pay off the credit card. It was like crazy, nutso, wacko, scary. And that wasn't even have anything to do with the charismatic world, but it's that same concept that you've got to do something to get greater faith. And if something has to happen. And in many cases, what they say is the way you get greater faith. I've seen it attached to this so many times. The way you can have greater faith is by giving money to us, right? Money that you may not even have, because that will show your faith that God will provide for you and that God will respond. And the greater the level of giving you demonstrate, the greater sacrifice, then the greater amount of money God will return to you to reward you of your faith. So in this particular case, hey, if you need the faith to get $25,000, you got to have a $25,000 level of faith. And how do you get it? Well, you've got to demonstrate that faith in some kind of way. And it's just interesting that one of the normal ways, and I'm not saying in every case, I'm not saying in every charismatic church, I'm not saying in every independent fundamental Baptist church. I'm saying that in many cases, I find it very interesting that the way you do that is by giving that specific ministry money. And then, so the ministry benefits, and then you supposedly benefit by now you've increased your level of faith. And so when now problems come into your life, you have the level of faith that will be sufficient to get you the provision to meet any need. So I guess I think I could flip this around. Like if we were in the middle of a debate, I could flip this around and say, okay. So then why doesn't everyone in your church get a sufficient level of faith so that you could empty out all of the hospitals in the local area? Like if you guys believe that you can increase your faith so that it can reach a $25,000 level of, provision, then why don't your church develop enough faith so that everyone in the city could be provided and they wouldn't be homeless, or they wouldn't be hungry, or they wouldn't be in the cancer ward, or they wouldn't be in a hospice getting ready to die? What? But it doesn't seem to work that way. I guess maybe you can only get enough level of faith that's sufficient for you, not for anybody else. I don't know. There's a lot of issues with this whole thing about how do you increase not only how do you increase your faith, how do you measure the increase? And what do you have to do? What are the steps you have to take?
The gift of faith is what gives you access to a realm greater than what you've worked into. Now, when you step into the gift of faith, you never return to where you were. You always return to a place a little greater than before, but not where you were in that moment. Sometimes we do the self-criticism thing because we can't sustain what we were capable of doing in the gift of faith. And it's that self-analysis that actually destroys our capacity to continue climbing in that lifestyle of faith. And so the Lord gives me an experience in the $20,000 faith. I don't return to the 1,000. I return to maybe 1,500, if that makes sense to you. It's like the experience has given me a strength. The experience that I got is just a gift. It came out of nowhere. I don't know how it came. I don't know how I got it. But I was positioned for it because I carried the overall attitude of the conviction of God's goodness, that I know nothing can come at me, that He won't work for His good and for His purposes. Which implies that not everything that comes at me is His will, because He has to rework it.
Whoa. Okay. Everything that comes at me is not God's will. He has to rework it? Okay, now we're getting into some pretty classic open theism here. I got to back that up. Okay, that almost got past me here. Okay, I got to back that up. Let's see if we can hear that again. He goes through this so quick. This is one of those things that we want a full teaching on this, a full explanation, and we're not going to get it here. But this is interesting. Okay, this is this is majorly problematic. All right, let's try to listen to this again.
Because I carried the overall attitude of the conviction of God's goodness, that I know nothing can come at me, that He won't work for His good and for His purposes. Which implies that not everything that comes at me is His will, because He has to rework it.
So that implies that everything that comes at me is not his will. Referring to God. This is no question here that he's referring to Satan. This is God, and then he has to rework it. So things happen, they're not God's will, and then he has to rework it. Well, if it wasn't his will, and then he had to rework it, if he's reworking it, well, then why wouldn't... Okay, I'm confused. So here's the sovereign God who's all-knowing. Something happens. He's like, oh, wait, that wasn't my will. Okay, now I have to rework it. So now he's going to rework it back to his will? Well, if his will was for that to never occur, then why would he... And then he's got to rework it or fix it, then why would he just never let it happen? And if he said, well, he will let it happen for a purpose, well, then it had to be his will. I'm very confused here. All right, so I'm trying to think this through. Okay, so let's go through this. So something happens to me, boom, it's bad. All right, that's not God's will. God steps in, now reworks it because that occurred not according to God's will. So now he's going to rework the situation to get it back into his will. But if he's reworking it, then why did he let the first thing happen in the first place? Did he know? So then now you get into the question, did he know it was going to happen? Now, if you say he didn't know, you're straight up into open theism. If he knew and he let it happen, wouldn't that have to be a part of his will? I mean, if he's going to rework it, why is he going to rework something? Because, well, that wasn't my will, but now I'm going to step in and now make it in my will. Well, then, so there's some serious questions here. I'm going to back that up one more time. Oh, wow. This stuff, it's just like you just do a little digging into this stuff and you just find it's just like poison. It's like you almost have to put some police tape around it and say, hey, this is an active crime scene of theology. This is an active crime scene where theology is being murdered. Stay away. This area is highly toxic. Stay away, because you just do a little digging. That sounds like open theism, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that's what that sounds like. And this would be from Bethel, so therefore this would be accurate. Again, Reformation Charlotte, they could have done a little digging and probably found more evidence of open theism than what they accused Jenna Winston of, who not even, it seems like possibly doesn't even attend Bethel-church anymore, as far as we know. We're not 100% sure. Here we go. Let's listen to this again.
Of the conviction of God's goodness, that I know nothing can come at me that he won't work for his good and for his purposes, which implies that not everything that comes at me is his will, because he has to rework it. Not everything that comes at us is God's will. We have confusion. One of our biggest areas of confusion in the church is concerning the sovereignty of God. We know that God is all-powerful. We know that he is in charge of everything. But with that, we make a mistake in thinking he is in control of everything.
Wow. Oh, boy. Okay, so God is in charge, but he's not in control. He's not in charge and control. So he can be in charge, but he's not in control. Things happen that's not a part of his will. Now, I'm just going to have to read really quick, very, very straightforward verse. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 9. Let's see here. Is it verse 9? Okay, verse 11, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. In whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of him who worketh all things after the counsel of his own will. Now, that's pretty straightforward. He's saying things happen that's not a part of his will. Then he has to rework it to bring things back to his will, and that God is not in control of everything, but he's in charge of everything. this sounds like absolute open theism. Absolute open theism. Let me go back to let me just give you the definition again. Open theism is also called free will theism and openness theology. It is the belief that God does not exercise meticulous control of the universe, but leaves it open for humans to make significant choices. Well, right there, that's just saying that it's open. Things can happen that God's not in control of. That's open theism. All right, and what comes along with this is that God has not predetermined the future. Open theists further believe that this would imply that God does not know the future. Now, he hasn't said anything about what God knows. He hasn't gone there, but I mean, this is getting you at least into, let's call it, level 1 of open theism. Let's go with there. We're going to back this up one more time. I know we're over an hour. I apologize for the lengthy introduction. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to try to play this uninterrupted. Here we go.
If you think he is in control of everything, then you have to believe that Hitler was his will, that he was just going to work it for.
Okay, wait a minute. We went forward. We didn't go backwards. Okay, I apologize. All right, here we go. Whoa, man, we've got some issues developing. We got some issues developing here. All right, I'm going to go all the way back to like the 5-minute mark. We've got to hear this in its context.
Overall attitude of the conviction of God's goodness, that I know nothing can come at me, that he won't work for his good and for his purposes, which implies that not everything that comes at me is his will, because he has to rework it. Not everything that comes at us is God's will. We have confusion. One of our biggest areas of confusion in the church is concerning the sovereignty of God. We know that God is all-powerful. We know that he is in charge of everything. But with that, we make a mistake in thinking he is in control of everything.
All right, now they just said, I know I just stopped. He just said God is all-powerful. Now, if God is all-powerful and God is all-knowing and something happens, well, that means he would have the power to stop it. And he knew it was going to happen, and he didn't do anything about it. How could you say that it's not his will? I have the power to stop it, I know it's going to happen, and I don't do anything about it. That's got to be somewhat a part of his will, because he could, if it wasn't, he could change it. He could stop it. Right? I mean, this is why you ultimately end up with saying God doesn't know, because you don't want to say God is not all powerful. So you have to go after the knowing. Well, he didn't know it was going to happen, and then boom, it happens, and then he has to try to then rework it to get it back into his will. He's always reworking everything because things are constantly, because you think of all the horrible things that happen. If none of those things are a part of God's will, then he's always reworking. Basically, God spends all day 24/7 reworking everything because things are constantly going the way he doesn't want them to go. So clearly he can't know it. And if he's all powerful, why is he got to constantly reworking it why wouldn't his power just be able to fix it instantaneously, like once and for all? You almost have to imply that he doesn't know here, even if they don't say it.
There's a difference from being in charge and being in control.
All right, control and in charge. He says there's a difference. All right. I know we're over an hour. That's okay. This is very, very important here. I'm gonna look this up. I'm going to look up in charge definition. All right, in charge means in control or with overall responsibility. So in charge means in control. He says there's a difference between being in control and being in charge. Now let's look up the definition of in control. I'm going to look up in control. In control means able to direct a situation, person, or activity. God is not in control, so he's unable to direct a situation, person, or activity. Doesn't he demonstrate his ability to do that throughout the Bible over and 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 over again? What do you mean? He's not in control. He's in charge. What do you, and in charge, remember that means to be in control. So maybe he has a dictionary maybe in Redding, California, there's a dictionary that I don't have access to. Maybe they're using a different dictionary. I'll just use it from a military perspective. Hey, you are in charge of the appointment line. That means not only was I in charge of it, I was in control of what took place on a daily basis. It was my responsibility. I had to direct and say, we're going to do this. We're not going to do that. This is what we're going to do. I had control and charge. Now, yes, you could say even being in charge and control was limited because I had people above me who had far greater in charge and control because of the military hierarchy and the military rank structure. But that's a whole different story. But the in charge and in control would be very similar in understanding. So like what? Is he making a distinction where there should be no distinction to try to somehow create a theology that that basically leads you to, if it's not open theism, then we need to find a new name for it. But maybe it's open theism light. And the only reason it appears to be open theism and light is he's yet to tell me if God knows everything. He's yet to, and if he states God doesn't know everything, then it's absolutely open theism. I think you could almost label. I don't know how you can't label this open theism as it is.
If you think he is in control of everything, then you have to believe that Hitler was his will, that he was just going to work it for his purposes.
Okay, now let's just now there's a joke. Whenever someone mentions Hitler or the Nazis, the argument's already lost, okay? Because it's just funny that everyone does that. Like, what about Hitler? It's like no matter what it is, you're a Nazi, Hitler, Nazi. Every argument that ultimately ends up with Hitler and Nazi. So with the Nazis. So let me just think this through logically. Okay, all right. Here's God, all powerful, all knowing. Now, if he's all-powerful and all-knowing, then he knows even before he created Adam and Eve, even before Genesis 1:1, where it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Before that ever happened, he knew that someone was going to be born, have the name Hitler, rise to power and control and being in charge there in Germany, okay? And that ultimately, through this individual and his actions and his policies, it was going to be a very instrumental in the world being at war, and that I think the numbers are somewhere between 4 and 6 million Jews who were exterminated and killed during the Nazi Holocaust. He had to know that before he created Adam and Eve. He had to know that Satan would fall before he created him. Now, if you say he did not know, now you're straight up open theism. But to say that Hitler wasn't his will, okay, well then did he know it was going to happen? Now, if you say yes, he knew it. Did he have the power to stop it? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, if he had the power and he knew and he didn't, what was that? Okay, Hitler, was God sitting in heaven going, Hitler, don't do it. Come on, don't do this. Don't do this. No. Don't load those people into that train. No. Don't send them to that concentration camp. Don't take them into the shower. Don't. It's not my will. 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 And it wasn't his will so it wasn't his will for the first 100 to die. It wasn't his will for the second one, for 200, for 300. At what point after how long of God's will being frustrated, did God ultimately step in after 6 million, 5 million are dead? Then God stepped in to rework things, to fix things, or was just constantly? So is God's will constantly being over? So is God helpless? Now, he's already said he's all powerful. Now, I know these gets into nobody likes these discussions. I know that. But that's the problem, is that Christians don't like these discussions because it gets people very emotional, very upset. And I understand. Look, I don't like a lot of these discussions. I don't like. But just because we don't like it doesn't mean we that's why the church has to talk about it, because next thing you know, you're creating a theology that says, hey, look, God, he hasn't yet said God is all-knowing, but if God is all-knowing and God is all-powerful and he doesn't stop what he knows is coming, even though he has the power to stop it, and you say that's not his will, then what is that? Now, some people say, well, that's his permissive will. It's not his. Okay, so it's his permissive will, then it's a part of his will. Because if he allows it, then that's a part of his will. Yeah, I don't know how you get around this. This is some crazy stuff. All right, let's continue.
Why would God raise something up to be his will that he empowers you to pray against? You've got a split personality. You've got the Father working against the Son working against the Father. So you have to understand that God has created a system where humanity gets to live, and through partnership, we get to demonstrate and manifest the dominion of God in the earth. He comes at our invitation because he has released the dominion to us. That's why prayer is so essential.
All right, let me flip this around. Okay, now and now this is a very sophisticated philosophical argument he just made, and I'm very impressed. It is a good one. All right, so this bad thing happens. If you're to pray against it, then why would that be God's will? That's a great question. That's a great question. So now, if we ask anything according to his will, it's supposed to happen, right? Okay, so do you think people were praying against Hitler pretty early on? Maybe after the first 100 died, the first 1,000 died. How many years did World War II continue? I don't have the exact date in front of me. Let me just look here how many years it occurred. Give me 1 second. World War, hang on. I don't want to be inaccurate in my estimation here. World War II, September 1, 1939 to September the 2nd, 1945. All right. So that's a number of years there. Okay. So, for all, it took that long. And let's see here. What's the total number here? Let's see if I have it here. Casualties over 16,000. Say, how do we have this broken down here? What's the total numbers here? Okay, it looks like over 61,000. No, what? That would be even more than that. What is that? Okay, I'm trying to get the exact numbers here. Whoa, if we start breaking up all of these numbers, it's absolutely staggering. Wow. Okay. Yeah. If you get into these numbers, you're in the millions of people who died. Millions of people. Yeah. The numbers are pretty staggering. Yeah. You're into the millions there if you get into the numbers of people who died in World War II. Okay. So here's the thing. Now I understand his argument. If God raises something up and it's according to his will and you're to pray against it, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. That's a very sophisticated question, and I understand that. But if people prayed against it and it's God's will to stop it and people are praying against it, why didn't it stop? Why didn't it stop? The first year, the second year, the third year, after the first 1,000 people died, after the first 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, 100,000, 300,000, 500,000, 1 million. The question could be reversed on you. Because God couldn't stop it? Because he's not in control? Well, if he's not in control, then how can he answer your prayer? If God is not in control, then how can he answer your prayer? God, hey, God, I need you to do this. I'm sorry, I'm not saying God would say this. Okay, I'm not saying this. I'm using for illustrative purposes. But I can't help you. I'm not in control. I'm in charge, but I'm not in control. And there's things that happen in your life that I'm not in control of. Well, if there's things happening in my life that God is not in control of, well, then how can I come to him and pray that he stops this or fixes it if he's not in control? Wouldn't he have to be in control to fix it? Wouldn't he have to be in control to overcome it? Wouldn't he have to be in control to change it? Like, this is this is insane. Okay, let me just tell the person who asked, I believe this is straight up open theism. I believe this, like the only thing that's missing is we don't, well, put it this way, for what he is claiming, you would have to believe, like the only way this logically works is that God doesn't know. I don't know how they could believe God is omniscient. I know they're going to claim they believe God is omniscient, but God being omniscient and omnipotent, and then things happen that's not a part of God's will, that things can happen to you that's not God's will because God is not in control, yet you can pray to that God with a certain level of faith, and God can literally overcome it and reverse it. Then God would have to be in control, right? Hey, I'm not in control, so I can't stop that cancer coming into your body, but if you have enough faith, I can get rid of it. Well, what? Wouldn't you have to be in control in the first place?
Many of the great saints in history believe that God's hands were so-called handcuffed, but released through prayer.
Whoa! God's hands were handcuffed, and then they are released by our prayers. So literally, we're God. Now, he says saints in the past. I would love to get those church father quote. I guess he's referring to the church fathers. I don't know who he's referring to. He's just referring to someone in the past who wrote it in their diary. I'm like who are these individuals? If you're going to make a claim like that, so God's hands are handcuffed, and then my prayers breaks. God's like, someone get me out of these handcuffs. Please get me out of these handcuffs. If you will let me out, I can help you. Well, then that means God needs my help. God is handcuffed, and I have the power to release him from the handcuffs. That is, oh, wow. I don't even know what this is. This is, okay. Wow. Okay. I'm trying not to be too animated here, but I'm about to pick up my laptop and toss it across the church. I'm about to I don't even know what's the point here. Okay. Okay, wow. All right, so someone is telling me supernatural laws, we follow the formula to manifest what we want. Word of faith comes from P.P. Quimby. At New Thought, they do teach he needs our help. They do teach God needs our help. Well, if God needs my help, then what's the point of having a God? Hey, God created me. So think about it. He created me so that I could help him. So he created me so that I could help him so that his will could be done. Because without me, I guess his will can't be done. So who did he need? Did he need someone to help him create? So he needed the things he create to help. This is just a train wreck. Wow. Okay. We got two more. I know we're already in an hour and 18 minutes, but we got to finish this. This is, I may have to do some more research into some of this stuff. I know some of you are like, you're just new. I'm not saying I'm new to some of this stuff, but no matter how many times I hear it, I lose it. Okay. That's the thing. I could hear this 1,000 times and you would get the same reaction every time.
Was released into the situation through the partnership with delegated authority on planet Earth, giving him permission to come. Now, he's God of everything. He's ruler of everything. He can step onto the stage anytime he wants.
Wait, he's ruler over everything? I thought you said he wasn't in control. So he's in charge and he's the ruler over everything, but he's not in control. And he can step in whenever he wants. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm not trying to be mean or sarcastic, but this is borderline like just absolute broken logic. This is just absolute broken nonsense. This is reaching the point of absurdity. This is not, he's a far better communicator than I am. He's a far better speaker than I am, but this is ridiculous.
But as C.S. Lewis put it, he says, when the author steps on the stage, the play is over. So if you want him to step on the stage, just realize the moment he does, it is over and everybody's choice ends where it is. And so if you believe that God is in control of everything, then you have to look at crisis and tragedy and say, well, he allowed it for a purpose. No, he didn't allow it for a purpose. He put us in a realm where our authority, our will, has an effect on what happens around us. It doesn't mean we walk in guilt and shame for tragedy, but it does mean we take ownership of responsibility on the earth.
Okay, whoa. So, all right, wait a minute. So now when things happen, it's not God's will, so it's not for his purpose? So there's no purpose when bad things, there's no divine purpose. Hey, Christians, when everything goes to garbage, it's not for, there's no purpose in it. It just happens. Now you have a responsibility. So now bad things happen, not God's will. We have the responsibility to exercise authority to fix the bad things by having a certain level of faith. So here, I think I understand this. It sounds like, now I don't know if this is implied, I don't know if this is what they're trying to explicitly say, but it seems implied that here's the situation. Look, everyone, the world is one absolutely messed up place. Now, God didn't want it to be messed up. God didn't want it to be messed up, all right? That's completely out of his control. He didn't want it to be messed up. I don't know if he knew it was going to get messed up, but it got messed up because they haven't yet to tell me where God's knowledge comes into all of this. So the world got messed up. Now, he puts us here. So the solution to fixing the problem is you and me by developing enough level of faith that we can therefore fix the world. It's not up to God to fix the world. It's up to you and I to fix the world, fixing cancer, COVID, everything, homelessness, starvation by exercising faith. If Christians would exercise enough faith, we could basically turn the world into heaven. It's not up to God now, it's up to us because he's delegated that authority and responsibility to you and to I. So we're the ones to fix the world. Well, Bethel-church, you're doing a garbage job. Let me just tell you, Bethel-church, it's a dumpster fire because, even in California, look at all the problems in California. Go fix California. Then when you're done, you can just move on to some other states, some other countries. In fact, just load everyone up in Bethel-church and let's send them, to Afghanistan. That'd be a good place to start. How about Iraq? Haiti. I don't know how many thousands of people have died in Haiti. How about you go to Haiti? Since y'all can fix everything, do it. Don't talk about it. Just stop all of your sermons and just go fix the world. Because it appears that's the teaching. It's not God. God can't do it because things are happening out of God's control. Now, we may need God, but it's a partnership. So it's not a monergistic situation, it's synergistic. Everything that's wrong in the world can be fixed through our delegated authority, and then we, by faith, can then free up God, and then God participates with us, and then we're a super team, right? It's like the dynamic twins, and we come together in superpower, and then we can fix everything. I think it was the dynamic twins. I don't remember the two twins and Super Friends from way back in the 70s and 80s from the cartoon, but you get the idea, okay? This is insane. Okay, we only got a minute left, so we have to finish this.
The question I ask people often is, how many storms did Jesus bless? How many life-threatening storms did he bless? How many of those storms did he redirect and say, now go destroy that city? It'll humble them and it'll teach them to pray. They'll become more like me. That's the church's response to crisis. Is that, well, God worked it for good. Well, he can use anything for good. That's our ace in the hole, so to speak. That's the trump card. Anything that happens, he can turn around for good. But it doesn't mean it was his will or his purpose. So if the Lord approves everything, then it's really difficult to believe him to change it. There's an idea that God creates a problem so that he can fix it to show us how strong he is. Listen, he's not an egomaniac. So if God didn't orchestrate the storm, why did it happen? My question is, who did he leave in charge? Who did he give his name to? Who did he give his authority to? Who did he give a model for, an example to follow? He gave us written in Scripture how the Son of God lives, and he said, as the Father sent me, I send you.
Wow. That is some of the most absolutely, I'm still wrapping my mind around all of that. Now we're already at an hour and 25 minutes, so I'm going to have to stop right there. I just want everyone to process all of that. I want everyone to figure that out. Members of Victory Baptist Church, definitely you can start processing this with all of our teaching in Romans chapter 8. And just when we've been looking at, the word foreknowledge, the word predestination, we started working on the word calling. Just the foreknowledge and predestination, and we approached that in not a normal teaching way. We did it in a different way, which is typical here. He just summed it up with all of that. He did. Who did he leave in charge? God left you and I in charge. Well, just go with 2,000 years of church history. We need to give up our authority. We need to just say, it's over, it's done. We have failed in 2,000 years of church history. Just think of what's happened in 2,000 years of church history. Let's just think about this. We could go with, the Revolutionary War. We could go with World War I, World War II. We could go with the Civil War. That's just things that I'm thinking of that would pertain to the United States of America. I'm not talking about all the other issues, all the other crises, all of the other slaughter and death and disease and plague and famine, serial killers, horrific storms, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, floods. 2,000 years, we're in charge. We are horrible at the job. We need to quit. We need to give up. We're absolute garbage. And again, in every city around America, just focus on America, there are charismatic churches who supposedly they've got the right doctrine, they have the right understanding. They don't fix garbage. They don't fix anything. Again, I could go right now to New Hope Church right there in Abilene, Texas. Come on, let's go. Right now, our hospitals here in Abilene are being overwhelmed with COVID patients. They are. It's serious situation. I don't know exactly how bad. There are places in Texas right now with just COVID. It's not good. I think the last numbers I saw, over 4 million people globally, I think, have died of COVID, since the pandemic began. Where are the charismatics fixing it? Where are the charismatics? Why didn't they just all fly to Haiti and fix that? Did they raise anyone from the dead? Did they do anything? When there's a massive storm coming, you can have a massive hurricane. Everybody knows the storm is coming. You're watching on the news week after week. Where are the charismatics? Just go line up on the beach and go, storm, be still, because you have the authority. They never do anything. You've got to be, I got to be nice here. I just don't, I'll put it this way. I don't understand. To me, you've got to be crazy. You've got to be insane. And I don't want to say someone is crazy, insane to believe this, but I don't understand how you can believe this. How can you believe something that you have to realize never comes to pass? Again, in the video, in fact, I'm going to verify this because I am almost 1,000% sure. I could be wrong. I'm almost 1,000% sure. I'm going to go to the video here. Yes, he's wearing glasses. Just cure your eyesight. That's all you need to do. Just cure your own eyesight. He's got a prescription, so there's clearly some deficiency in his vision, whether near or far, whatever the case may be. He seems, now he may have bifocals on, so, I don't know what kind of prescription. Just heal your eyesight. And if I was in the medical community with that church, I guarantee you, if I was in the medical community of Redding, California, I guarantee the people from that church are going to the doctors for all kinds of things. I've watched it in my whole 22 years in the medical world. I worked with someone in the medical world who claimed to be an apostle, for crying out loud, never healed anybody. In fact, he walked into the resource management office where I worked, because the woman I worked with had just received a diagnosis for terminal cancer. I think they said she had 6 months to live. He comes walking in. I almost lost it. As soon as he walked in, I almost wanted to just grab my chair and throw it at him. He walks in over to her office. Her office is right there next to mine. It's like a little cubicle, but the door is open so I could hear him and another person from the church. I think they may both claim to be apostles. They go in there and they tell her that God had told them that she will be healed. She started weeping and crying. She was hugging them. She was like, I'm going to go home and tell my family. It was like this big celebration. She went home, told her family. Everybody was happy. She came to work the next day, like, walking on air. I'm going to be healed. I'm going to be healed. I'm going to be healed. And less than 6 months, she was dead. And the garbage human beings who told her that didn't even bother to show up to apologize to her family and to her kids, who now had been told that God was going to heal their mom. That stuff is so stinking evil that it makes me just like, oh. You want to talk about Christians whining and crying and complaining about being persecuted? How about the nonsense? What do you call that when charismatics run around making all of these promises and claims that are not true, destroying people's lives? What do you call that? I think Christians have been persecuting people for a very long time. Yeah, that we're in charge, and we take off the handcuffs of God. And God is not in control, but he's in charge. But God can't basically do anything without us. And all kinds of things happen in your life. That's not God's will. But God is omnipotent, but he's not really, he's only omnipotent when we take the handcuffs off. And then I guess we control the omnipotence. I don't know if he's all-knowing because he didn't bother to explain that part of it. If that's not enough to make you run from, you know what? I hate to say this. If I lived in Redding, California, forget not going to that church. I think I would pack up my bags and get out of the entire state. I think I would flee that place like it's Sodom and Gomorrah. I think I would run for my absolute life and absolute terror like there was a wildfire coming through. That is poisonous garbage that can destroy people's lives and lead people to utter atheism and completely leaving Christianity. That is an absolute travesty, what we just heard. That is, so we don't need, what, you don't need anything else. I mean, literally, you don't need anything else. If that doesn't do enough, if that doesn't do enough, I don't know what else. Now, I know Bill Johnson released a video where they do a possible clarification on God's sovereignty. We will review that. We will review that because that's the clarification, and I can see why they had to do a clarification. So maybe they fix it. We will review that at a later time. So I will at least revisit this. But, I mean, what else do you need? Bethel-church is heresy. It's heretical. It's damning. It's dangerous. And they just destroyed the doctrine of God, his omniscience. They literally destroyed his omnipotence. They destroyed his sovereignty. They basically turned you into God. What they basically did was, this is what Bethel Church just did. They kicked God off the throne and put us there. And that is blasphemy. And I'll end with that. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Wow, I am sorry I got so angry. I am sorry, but I am literally sweating. That's how angry I got. I don't even know what to say. That, in all honesty, we need to pray for everyone at Bethel. We really need. We need to pray that God would somehow have grace and mercy and bring them to the truth. And I'm gonna say more about this in regards to discernment and criticism and what's really important. I think I'm gonna do another broadcast here shortly. I'm gonna be here for the next few hours, so I don't know what I'm gonna do the rest of the time here because this took an hour and 34 minutes, and wow, that took a lot out of me. I'm literally like, whew, I'm I'm going to have to walk around for a minute and regain my composure. And if it doesn't upset you, I know you may be thinking I'm getting too upset. I would argue that no, you're not upset enough. That should just literally make you sick because what we just heard. Wow. And I do know. And look, I know that we didn't get the whole clip there. We didn't get the whole audio. And I know right now we can't track it down where track it down. But I can tell you this, there's nothing in that 9 minutes that would indicate that we're ripping anything out of context. Now, maybe he offers some clarification later to try to backtrack some of that. But based off what he just said right there, that is some of the worst theology I may have ever heard in my life. That's how bad that was. All right, you can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Thanks to the person who's listening. Thank you very much. I appreciate not only your comments, the person also gave us a financial gift yesterday that was very, 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 very encouraging, and we greatly appreciate that. And thank you because that goes to, well, not only support what we're doing here, it also provides access to the curriculum that we're using for the Bible study exercise, and people from around the world have accessed that. And so we appreciate that. So thank you very much for that. And wow. Okay, I'm gonna go get something to drink. I don't drink alcohol, but if there was ever a time I could start, I'm thinking about finding a liquor store and, I don't know, getting a bottle of Jack or something. Okay, I'm joking. I'm not going to drink alcohol, but that could lead me to some serious alcoholism right there. If that was my first, there's things that they just said there that it would lead me away from Christianity, definitely not to it. All right. I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. I'll be back on the air hopefully here shortly. God bless.